Thank you for joining me in this journey in making my day dress. I really enjoyed the process. It was a learning experience. I did get stalled out a little bit around the sleeve portion and then again when I was putting in the buttons. But overall, I had a wonderful time with this new project. I hope you enjoy it. Please hit subscribe. Please hit like so I can continue to bring you good content on making stuff in my art room. Have a beautiful day. This is a dress that appears to have been worn from the 1860s to the 1900s. This dress is an everyday dress as well as it could have been worn for visiting, receiving guests, summer and winter events. The styles vary greatly over this period of time, as do the choice of materials. What seems to be pretty universal is that you would wear this over your cami corset and a skirt petticoat combination. There is no waist seam, but this style flows directly downward using darts and clever cuts of the fabric. My day dress is for home use only. I only wanted to try out a new pattern from the Victorian dressmaker, as well as to gain a lightweight, comfortable dress for around the house. My choice of fabrics were to use what I had in my stash. I chose a 100% deep sapphire blue poplin shirting fabric acquired from Fabric Mart back in the summer of 2019. I acquired 5 yards for $4.55 a yard, a really good bargain. It was not very wide, so I figured I would probably end up using all 5 yards, which is what happened. I did not want to interline this garment fully as I wanted it to be as light as possible, but I also knew that I wanted to add some boning to the bodice waist area, and I would need interlining for those pieces. I also chose not to add ruffles or any embellishments to this garment, as it was not only to be just a house dress, but also a trial piece for another garment to be made soon. I wanted to save fabric and time by keeping this one as simple as possible. I chose to use 100% cotton fabric in my stash for the interlining. It's a dark blue quilting cotton I had on hand. I used green bias tape scraps for the boning channels, and the boning is made of zip ties. As for the hem, I used flexi bias lace tape, and the buttons are a plastic dark blue of medium size. For the pattern, honestly, it was a journey through many images on Pinterest, fashion plates, and drawings. The Victorian Dressmaker by Isabella Pritchard, The Prior Attire, which made the next step much easier. I chose to use the pattern from page 156, the Polonaise. I did have to adjust the side pieces to fit my form better. I also chose to use the pattern sleeves from my Tudor tailor dress as they fit much better than the pattern sleeve pieces from the Polonaise. I did have intentions of adding waist tape or a bodice closure piece, but on this dress for home, I skipped that in the end. I used cotton sheeting for the mock-up and only did a mock-up to just past the hips. When I drew out the pattern, I cut the pieces. I did extend them down to the floor. Step 1 is cutting out all the appropriate pieces in both cotton poplin and cotton sheeting fabrics. Unfortunately, I did not get any images of this process. The second process is to go back and mark all the layers where the darts need to show up. I used the traditional colored carbon marking paper and a marking wheel. I then sewed the interlining to the cotton poplin. I then assembled all of the pieces. I also attached the sleeves. I do not have footage of this process, but I did end up cutting off some of the upper shoulder area to place in the sleeve. The underarm placement was perfect. I did use flat felled seaming on every part of the dress other than the arm's eye. Once all the pieces were assembled, I needed to try it on, to see where the boning pieces needed to be and measure them out. I used chalk to mark placement and used green bias tape to create a sleeve for each of the pieces of boning. I then hand-stitched the bone casings into the interlining of the bodice over the darts I had already tacked down. Then I worked on the buttonholes using pins to mark the placement, using the machine to create buttonholes, and using fray check before chiseling the buttonholes open. All of the buttonholes have been put on the top part of the dress. I still have to hem it and figure out how long it needs to be, and I also need to finish all these inside seams. So I'm going to put a little fray check on each one of these buttonholes before I cut it, and then I'm going to work on the inside seams while that dries. So I have my boning channels in. I have finished all of my seams. The only seam I need to worry a little bit more about is the armhole, but I haven't figured out how I'm going to finish that yet. I discovered a while ago I could use my dress dummy, if properly padded, to make a nice even hem. I dressed the dummy, used chalk and my hand to measure floor length and cut along that line. I then folded up the hem 1 inch and put in bias tape lace, and voila, a finished hem with no fuss. I find it easier than trying to guess. The final dress is comfortable and cool. I have now worn it 3 or 4 times and washed it twice in the washer. I do air dry it on a hanger due to the boning. It is comfortable and also supportive in the bust with the boning that I am not required to wear a bra or a corset. It does fit better with a corset, but also without. I have worn it over my nightgown as well as a cami and petticoat. If I were to make another house dress wrapper style, I would for sure add the front waist closure piece under the bust and under the top closure. It's similar to a waist tape, only a wider piece of fabric. I believe that would relieve the stress points in the fabric and the bunching up front. The other thing I would change is I would add more buttons all the way to the floor. I just didn't have any for this project. I will be using this pattern to draft another project coming up. I needed the patterning for the upper part of the dress as it is a natural form era type garment. It's inspired, not actually historically accurate. I will be using a sturdier interlining and more boning also to relieve the stress points of the garment. This house day dress does not need a bustle, but for the garment to go in and about in, I feel I not only do need the corset, but I will also need a bum pad to help the silhouette. I'm very excited to work on my next project. Please hit subscribe. Please hit like. Join me over on Patreon and join me on Instagram. Have a beautiful day, lovelies.